listening to the Guitar Heroes podcast.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Jazz Hour. Jazz is the name.
I'm
Jazz
so
is the
sorry.
game. Yeah.
Anyone who's listening have just pulled their headphones out or just...
Yeah, I think I can hear my neighbours banging on the wall.
Hello, everybody. How we doing?
Right,
we're
first
doing
thing
great.
first,
Hello,
who's
Phil.
got their guitar on? Because I can just hear hiss. Who is it?
My bad. My bad.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
I got my 80s fuzz distortion on.
God, I feel a little out of breath right now.
Knackered.
Put your pants back on. Oh, dear.
And so it begins.
Right,
So,
here we are again, chaps. Here we are again.
yeah, I think today, what are we doing? We're visiting the 80s. Desert Discs.
We are.
Is that what we're calling it? Desert Discs? Or
It
It's
was
called Desert Riffs, isn't it?
Desert Riffs, that's it.
No, Desert
Yeah.
Island Riffs.
Desert Island Riffs.
I tell you what, it's a good job we know what we're doing here, isn't it? I tell you what. Have you seen the Rock on Tours with Guy Pratt and Gary Kemp? They have all sorts of famous people on there. They were voted on Apple, I think it was, the #1 best music podcast. Fancy that?
right.
Yeah, I've heard a couple of episodes. It's cool stuff.
They're good. Yeah, I mean they're nowhere near in our league, obviously.
Well, they can only dream. One day,
I mean, listening
maybe.
to that intro, who's going to come close to that, eh?
they can only dream of being this bad.
You can tell we're excited for today's episode because we had about 3 minutes before we actually came on air where the three of us were just sat here like, yeah, I'll just be a minute. Oh, so yes, we are here today wearing spandex, aren't we?
Well,
maybe
just
we
because, sorry guys, I'm so unprepared today. I haven't long been home, to be honest. I've been out all day. I've been on a guitar safari.
Oh, do
Ooh.
tell.
Can't- secret.
New purchases?
Top secret. I can't tell you. I'm just teasing
Top
you. again.
secret.
I have bought another guitar though.
Oh, come on, you can't.
I can't. No, can't tell you.
leave us
Okay,
hanging
give
like
us a
that.
colour. Just give us a colour or a shape.
Is
it star-shaped?
Definitely guitar shaped. I can't tell you the color because that'll just give it away. What I've got. What I've just got.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
the color is key then, yeah.
Well, it is to the guitar. Yeah, it needs a bit of work doing to it though. It needs a bit of
Oh, does it?
fettling. But yeah, it's very nice.
Bit of love from Phil, eh?
I think I know.
Do you?
Yeah.
Oh dear.
I've just realised what it is.
Should we tell
I won't.
Podcast World? Should we tell them? Should we tell them what I've just got?
Well, that's up to you, Phil. You got to make that call.
I might do. Yeah,
You might regret it.
I might regret
Drink
it.
a bit more port, and then it might slip out.
Well, everybody's going to be like, "Why have you got one of them? What do you want one of them for?" Well, I've always wanted one of these. I've just bought a resonator guitar, a dobro. It's really nice. I've never had one before in my life, and I was like, fancy one of them. And,
They're lovely guitars.
And we'll leave it there.
yeah, exactly. On with the
Okay.
80s. You stick that somewhere where we ain't going to hear it.
were many dobros used in the 80s, do you think?
Possibly. Yeah, possibly. Yeah, and that's that.
Actually, who's that guitar player who was on the 87 Crossroads film? All the slide guitar parts were
Rykuda.
done by
Rykuda.
Rykuda. He was an 80s guitar player who actually played a dobro, didn't he?
I don't know if you. Well, I guess he must have played dobro. I guess most slide players have played dobro at some point, haven't they?
Yeah, all the pictures I've seen of him actually with the dobro.
Okay.
Great stuff.
Yeah, brilliant.
So many cool songs, albums. So yes, we are wearing spandex, and I've gone and got my hair permed, as you can see. So we're ready for today's feast of 80s goodness.
We can see, but we should put your trousers on, Lee.
Today's the one day that I'm allowed them off.
You are, yeah.
I've gone for the mankini instead.
We can see that. Thankfully, podcast people can't. Oh, dear.
So we're all
me.
armed, hopefully all armed with some sort of Schecter, Charvel, something like that with a Floyd Rose, correct? Oh no! Look, we've all just got Fenders because none of us own anything that's particularly 80s. Actually, I can see something hanging behind you, Phil. That's quite 80s.
Yeah, I've got.
And you do own a Steve Vai gem as well.
Yeah, there's two things hanging behind me. Oh, actually, and I've got a Prince Cloud guitar. That was really 80s, wasn't it? But no, you say 80s, but I mean, I've got my old Strat with me, and the old Strat was quite an 80s guitar, to be honest, especially the 70s ones, because, you know, in the early 80s, the 70s guitars were newish, weren't they? You know, they were still out there being played. And I remember Europe, the guitar player from Europe has got exactly the same model as what I've got, the 70s reissue Strat. And if you look at Motley Crue, I forgot, how can I forget his name in Motley Crue? What's the guitar player called? Help me, Mick.
He was about 20 years older than the rest of them, wasn't he?
What's his? Crikey, that's really that's dreadful. He basically plays a old souped up Strat, doesn't he?
Do you know what? I've got Google open because I was going to start with. I've got the 1980s.
Got a bottle of port open.
Actually, yeah, we haven't done that yet. What are we drinking? By the way, if it sounds like I've got a cold, don't fret. I haven't got a cold, and I haven't got the dreaded C word. My hay fever is just playing up. Just the pollen has kicked in this week, and I just knocked me for six. But yes, what are we drinking?
Sorry, what did you say about?
I've got a Whistable Bay here.
Oh well, snap, Chris! I had a wonderful delivery from a good friend of mine. Popped around earlier and brought me some Whitstable Bay. So
it's good, isn't it?
It is really good. Yeah. It's lovely.
Yeah, it's very nice, especially when it's cold. It's a pale ale. Trying to think, I don't know whereabouts. I should actually look to where this is from. Some more interesting facts following my conversation on bees last episode.
Sorry, guys, I'm not interested. I've just spilt my port.
I was just saying, what is Phil doing? I've just seen him get what looks to be like a pack of wet wipes out.
Oh, no, I'll take you some tissues.
I love the description of this, Lee.
Handy pack of tissues.
Whistable combines old seaside charm with a modern bohemian vibe. That sounds cool. You would just buy it just on those words alone, wouldn't you?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Where is Whistable Bay? Can anyone message in and tell us where Whistable Bay is? You got Google open, haven't you?
Message in? Yeah, I was going to Google. Motley Crue.
I think we've got to have some listeners before people message in.
There is that. There is that. Mick Mars. Of course, it's Mick Mars.
I knew it was Mick something.
Mick Mars. Right. So I've got Wikipedia open here. On the page for the 1980s. So I thought we'd just delve into, like we've done in the other years, other decades. Avid listeners of the podcast will be familiar with this format now. We essentially delve into a decade and bring forth our favourite guitar players, songs, albums, anything that we feel represents our personal journey as a guitar player, but also something that affected the wider world. And it's good to have a bit of context. So
Absolutely.
Here we go, Wikipedia.
Hang on, sorry. Do you need your music? Do you need your music queuing?
Well, I must admit, I'm not as prepared. I haven't got notes, hence why I've got that. I'm cheating a little bit.
Too much time at the pub, isn't it?
I think. Here.
Right.
It's been a busy old week. So we'll start at the top. The 80s redirects here for AD 80 to 89. See 80s. The 1980s, pronounced 1980s, shortened to the 80s. Is this too detailed? Tell me if I should stop. I've top to bottom it. I've read through, and essentially a lot of stuff happened. But the takeaway point here was that technology. I think in music, this is the era where certainly the computer really started to get involved. Outside this, we've got things going like the first space shuttle being launched. We've got Reagan being elected as president. You got the end of the Cold War. Also, I should note, 1980, we kick off with the assassination of John Lennon. And maybe that, maybe, much like,
also
was it the 70s episode that started with the disbanding of the Beatles? There seems to be something with Beatles happening at the start of a decade, and maybe what it suggests. So with the tragic assassination of John Lennon, maybe that was a sign of where music was going to go, because
we also
the computer
lost
was
John
here
Bonham
to stay
as well
that
point. Year. We lost John Bonham that year. I'll be on that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, a lot of deaths in the 80s, actually. Actually, to start the era, 1980s specifically. However, musically, it was an awesome era.
Well,
I was born in the 80s. I'm awesome.
you say that,
I
Chris,
think.
but I think of all the decades we've covered, I think the 80s, do you not find that it's a Marmite era? It seems to have something about it that, like, anything that's associated 80s is either, like, really great or really pants. Like,
Well, in my
nobody
mind, it's the beginning of the end.
Oh,
It's the
oh
beginning
dear.
of the end. The 80s. There's a few good things to come out of the 80s. Obviously, Toto. I mean, they're just awesome. Me and Chris fight over the solo on Rosanna for that, don't we? Here we go. There's a lot of good stuff to come out of the 80s. A lot of good stuff to come out of the 80s, but it was also the beginning of the end, I think, in a lot of ways. The beginning of all those stupid drum sounds that make Al.
Well,
Al gets a little bit of sick in his mouth every time he hears like a sampled drum sound or synth drums and that type of thing. And I don't blame him. And there's a lot of things like the guitar synth that came out. Great, but come on, that's why we've got keyboard players, isn't it?
It was kind of like the commercial era, don't you think? A lot of there was obviously a few stories of bands kind of selling out, reforming, and becoming more commercial. And
Well, you know why that was? That was going to be my next point. One of the big things that obviously happened in the 80s was the introduction of MTV.
MTV, of course,
And obviously what that did for music, taking it into a visual format and obviously putting pressure on artists and bands to incorporate that side. And it really kind of either made or broke some of the classic 60s and 70s, but some people just didn't survive the change, did they? And other bands absolutely took to it like a duck to water and really used it to the utmost and launched probably the strongest part of their career. But it is a bit weird that you've got this hangover of this some of this great 70s music and then some of those classic bands sort of got swept up in the 80s movement with like you say, drum machines, synthesizers, and a few bands kind of went through their weird phases like that. I don't know. It's Marmite.
Yeah. I've got to be honest. Like I said, there's a lot of good stuff to come out of the 80s, which you guys are going to talk about. So I've left well alone from the heavy rock stuff because I was thinking you guys are just going to do that anyway. I know you are.
Well,
but,
Chris is.
Yeah, Chris probably will, yeah.
You already know what I got planned.
But honestly, the one thing that really burnt my toast in the 80s, right, was...
Yes, I've been waiting for it.
Ding, ding, ding.
Was all of that...
Wait a sec, Phil.
What?
What really burnt my toast?
Just making a note.
All right, sorry. What really burnt my toast in
yet.
the 80s was all that...
What's the date today?
I don't know.
27th.
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 Yeah,
27th
27th of April, 1984. It was all that synthy stuff, I mean, there was so many. I used to watch Top of the Pops, and I was looking for the guitar. I was going, oh, great guitars, and you get you get somebody, this could almost be a rant, but we don't do rants on these episodes, do we? But you get two twerps on keyboards. And somebody in the middle doing a ridiculous dance with a microphone that's got like a lead plugged in that's like it's been chopped off. And do you know what I mean? I just don't like all that sort of stuff. I don't like that sort of stuff. I'm a guitar player. I love the rock side of the 80s, but the rest of it can go down the plug hole for me. I don't care.
Well, I think the 80s as a decade, because the 70s was so strong, like we said in our previous
the strongest of all eras.
Yeah, our previous Desert Island Riffs episode on the 70s, we actually said that we'd probably return to the 70s at some point just because there's so much to cover there. But it was such a raw time, that kind of culmination of everything coming together where the technology was just where it needed to be to not impede the product, the output of music, or not impede the creativity, maybe I should say. And then you just had all of those bands coming together. And as the 80s started, I think what you see is, as the decade moves on, more and more of that technology and that overproduction and that kind of slightly, shall we say, cheesy element to it came in. And I think that, that really culminated we'll get onto the 90s, but probably what one good thing to come from it was the start of the kickback. So the grunge era and everything that just basically fought back against everything the 80s had become by that point. But that's not to say that certainly in the first half of the 80s, you've still got that amazing sort of 70s rootsy, more organic vibe to things.
Yes.
I think
One of my favourite things was the transition from Whitesnake, from being like a bluesy rock type band into the big 80s big hair band that they were.
Right.
I sort of love that transition. I've got a few of those albums, like from Bernie Marsden to Steve Vai. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, Coverdale always spoke of Whitesnake as being like a show, and he wanted performers more, and obviously big name guitar players coming into the band, and there's just a constant evolution with them, isn't there? I think, but yeah, that transition from Bernie Marsden to like all the way up to Steve Vai is insane. Like totally different band, isn't it?
Yeah. It's totally different, yet completely the same.
Yeah,
isn't it? You know the early Whitesnake. Is Whitesnake, and sort of slip of the tongue, and Here I Go Again. That's Whitesnake as well, and even the later stuff they did. When they had Doug Aldridge on guitar. Coverdale's ace. Coverdale for president.
Yes, I think so.
Right, go on then. I guess that's enough context. So let's delve into it. Who wants to go first and give your nomination and who you're going to talk about specifically?
I'll go first.
Okay. Right. I'm genuinely worried. We need to stop playing that, otherwise we might be in line for some sort of copyright strike. Lukather will be on the phone wanting royalties if you keep doing that.
Honestly, the way we play it, we won't be getting done by copyright or anything.
No. Yeah, it could copyright the intro. I mean, so I'm going to start at the back end of the 80s, 1987.
Okay.
Ooh, okay.
I'm just gonna play it, and you can tell me if you know what it is.
All right.
This is one of my favorite guitar solos of the 80s. Every time I listen to it, it's got everything for me. It's got the song, the vocals, and especially the guitar solo. So simple, great tone. I've tried to get as close to the record as I can.
I'm gonna guess just from the year. I think I might know what it is. But
okay,
I'll keep stum for now.
And we can build this dream together.
Yeah. So the song is
Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now.
Gonna Stop Us Now by Starship from 1987 off the album No Protection.
Amazing.
The guitarist is a chap called Craig. I had trouble pronouncing this. Craig Chaquico, his name is. And obviously on vocals, Mickey Thomas and Grace Slick. Amazing vocalists. Mickey Thomas, one of my favorite male vocalists. Literally sings in like a female range, and it's quite a tough song to cover. This song, in fact, was the second best-selling song of 1987, actually, which is pretty cool. But obviously, I think we've mentioned this before, Lee, like with Back to the Future and stuff. Like, I associate a lot of 80s tunes with films that I've watched.
I was going to say, make that point and say, like, what a great decade just for films. For anyone of our sort of generation, it doesn't get better than those.
It's the
just real quick
as well that really
what's
makes
your favourite film from the 80s? Then you can just pick
Back
one.
to the Future.
Oh, you bet.
Back to the Future.
Done.
Back to the Future 2.
Not only for the film itself, but for the musical references and for the impact it had on me it literally inspired me just as much as some of those records that we're discussing. All credit to Michael J. Fox. Just stellar. I think
absolutely.
The guitar community as a whole, should thank him more often because. It's one of those references that you hear so much. There's so many people that I've met along the way that's like, what made you pick up a guitar? It's like, well, the Under the Sea dance when he comes on and plays Johnny B. Good. That was it. That was Genesis.
That's your brother, Marvin.
But I think that's probably why you've gone the second film, Phil, because in the second film, that's when you get all the references from the first one, and you notice how they all tie into each other, and it's absolutely brilliant.
Genius.
So good.
The third one's just
but
great because I always wanted to be a cowboy.
Yeah.
Yeah. We should do a separate
just on-
podcast just on why Back to the Future is so good.
Yeah,
We
it'd be
should
really
do,
sharp.
absolutely.
Because it is. Thank
Yeah.
you. Good night.
Go and watch it. And you'll
Yeah.
find out.
So this Starship song featured in Mannequin, which is a big film of the
It
80s.
did, yeah, that's right. It's a great film.
Yeah, it's a really cool film actually. I love 80s films. Me and my wife Amy, we've been going through watching a lot of 80s films at the moment, just kind of reeling them off. We had Dirty Dancing on last week, and yeah, so good. But it's the soundtracks, I think, that kind of grabs me towards those films more than anything. It's the songs. And
Do you know another one? I've
And,
got a guilty pleasure, Chris.
go on.
Right, you'll know this.
Say you don't know me.
Another Starship song.
Yeah. So this band, obviously, they started off as Jefferson Starship, obviously, and there was like a lawsuit and everything, and eventually became Starship. But a bit like Fleetwood Mac, you know, they started off with a completely different sound, and then I don't know if it's a commercial thing that kind of intervened, but obviously band members change, and then suddenly they become very commercial. The songs become a lot more poppy. And almost in that category of selling out almost. But I don't know, I listen to this song and I'm just like, man, it's so good, and I love the latest Fleetwood Mac stuff as opposed to, you know, the Peter Green era. So, you know,
This wasn't what I was thinking when you said the year, and it's nice to know that you did go headfirst straight into the cheesy end of things there, Chris.
Oh mate, it's I'm all about the cheese.
I'll tell you what though, Chris, if you got a choice, Pet Shop Boys or that, I mean, which are you going to go with?
Of course, it's a no-brainer.
Talking
Pet
of
Shop
cheese
Boys.
and films from the 80s, what about...
Footloose, yeah.
I love it. I love that
It's a
tune.
good song.
I love
See, the
that
great
tune.
riff. I mean, I don't know why they bothered with synthesizers because there was just so many great guitar hooks from the 80s, weren't there? Just amazing.
Yeah, it's jam packed. It's jam packed. But there are some bands that it worked for. Like I said, I think it kind of either made or broke some of those classic 70s bands. They even managed to make the change and jump into the MTV era. And I mean, look at like Aerosmith. Like obviously they were a big band, but the collaboration with Run DMC and the whole music video and everything that came with it. Look at how it managed to. Not that it made them, but I think it managed to bridge the gap and keep them relevant and keep them moving forward.
Definitely, yeah. I love that song. I love both versions.
Yeah. It just, and I mean, this isn't my choice for today, but one of my favorite bands and favorite guitar players, Billy Gibbons, ZZ Top, they were like the poster boys for MTV. You know, think of music videos like Legs, and you know, they really took to that, and at the time they were one of those bands. They're sort of a band of two halves, a bit like Fleetwood Mac. You've got the sort of pre-MTV era, which is that Texas boogie woogie blues, almost sounds like a different band. And then they either had to roll with the times and adapt, or probably fade away and just remain as a band from the 70s. But look at how that album Eliminator and the music videos that came with it managed to suddenly introduce them to a global audience instead of just like a kind of blues rock audience. And that was it. You know, still going today. Probably because
so much
of that
variety
era.
with that band. Yeah, I love the song. Is it "I Need Your Love Tonight"? Is that one? I think that's the title of the song, and it's a real kind of slow ballady sort of number. Some great guitar tones on that. Tons of delay, and it's so 80s. It's soaked in 80s. That song.
Well, that album Eliminator is just the genius of Billy there. Not enough people realise that it was essentially just Billy and the producer. I don't think Dusty and Frank actually played on that at all. It was like a studio project to sort of see if they could delve into the 80s and see if it would work, blending that bluesy guitar stuff with synthesizers, drum machines, and it gave us "Give Me All Your Lovin'," "Sharp Dressed Man," "Legs," "Rough Boy." Like, you know,
it's the sort of music you associate with like American bars and, you know, sort of thing. A bit like, you know, with Jeff Healey and stuff. It's that kind of 12-bar rock and roll blues, but with, you know, heavy guitar tones and a bit of delay, and you know.
And they were in Back to the
big fan
Future
of it.
3, so there you go. You know that?
I
Please
did-
tell me
I
you
didn't
know that.
I didn't know that.
Weren't they
What?
cowboys?
What? The
They were-
soundtrack to Back to the Future 3? Double
I thought
released-
you meant. I honestly thought you meant that they were in the film. I'm going to say,
They are.
I
Like,
thought
that
you
cameo
they are in
as
it as-
cowboys.
Yeah,
They are in it.
They are in it. They're the three guys that come forward, and they actually play like a sort of country and western cowboy version of that tune. And they come forward, and they've got their like mariachi guitars that spin, don't they? In the third
Oh
film.
my god, I need to
That's
watch.
I'm
Easy
gonna,
this.
have to,
talk.
I'm gonna have to watch
I really
it again.
Need to watch this again.
That film has got so many layers to it. It's insane.
There you
Oh,
go.
you know what we need to be doing then when we're on tour? Yes, watching Back to the Future, and anybody who doesn't pay attention gets sent out.
Mm.
Yeah.
Homework. Al's
I think
usually
I'll be
watching
the first
something else
one,
though,
yeah.
so good luck with that.
I know. He does love kids' TV. Mm. You're listening to the Guitar Heroes podcast. Oh, you've got
Nice.
a step ladder behind you.
No, it's actually a shelf unit that is waiting to be deployed somewhere suitable. At the moment, I'm still battling with trying to decorate this wall. I'm in the process of learning that, do you know what? I'm not a painter and decorator.
You should get Jay round. She's done all our house.
Is she good?
She's amazing.
Well, I can paint. I can paint the wall, but what I've realised when I've been doing some touch-ups, I did a load of touch-ups and then realised that I've got the wrong colour paint. So
Yeah.
that was where I went wrong there. I thought it just looked dark because it was wet, and then it dried and it went a different colour.
Yeah, it's always
Oh.
a bit of an issue. Yeah.
So there we go. I'll probably leave this bit in the podcast. I'm sure
Yeah,
people.
yeah. Well, no,
Yeah,
people would be
probably
interested in that.
Right, back to the 80s. Where were we? So,
Back to the 80s.
Chris, nice one. Like I said, straight in at the cheesy end of things.
Yeah.
Yes.
Love it.
You know me.
Shall I bring us back into the land of guitars?
Go for it.
Okay. So. Ready? I'm talking about Dire Straits. Okay, and you're on about MTV. MTV, Money for Nothing was the first song on MTV.
Was it?
Yeah, yeah. And who would have thought Dire Straits, just being basically a band, you wouldn't think anything, flash about them. And they were, they were like pioneers of the music video, weren't they, with their Money for Nothing video? I don't know if you remember it, that cartoony type video. Check it out if you don't remember it.
I think I do.
I'm gonna have to go and watch that, I think.
Seen it.
Yeah,
Obviously, I know the
and,
reference to it in the song, but I didn't know it was the first video on there.
Yeah, apparently so. I guess that's
How does
arguably, but
How does that work then? Because they must have. Did they go back and add in the line about MTV? Because when they'd written the song, MTV might not have existed.
I think, I'm not entirely sure about that, but apparently Mark Knopfler wrote the song by listening to. He was in America, and he was in an appliance store, and it was like, I think he described it as like a meathead that worked in there. He was going, oh yeah. Look at them yo-yos, and he was quoting all these lines. Oh, that ain't working. That's the way you do it. He was quoting Mark Knopfler's behind this guy, behind a microwave, writing all these lines down, and, and that's kind of. But yeah, you're right about the MTV. What came first, the chicken or the horse?
Chicken or the egg? Yeah.
Oh, the egg. Yeah.
Or the horse.
I got mixed up then. Cat or horse or chicken or egg.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
funny
anyway.
that you've mentioned Dire Straits and a resonator guitar on the same episode there, Phil.
Well, there you go.
Well.
Mark Knopfler, he used a resonator guitar, didn't he, on Romeo and Juliet?
He did indeed.
He did. So
He
he said,
did
did
indeed.
anybody else use one? And he used one on Telegraph Road as well at the beginning. But one of my favourite albums, and probably if I was to just keep one album out of my whole collection, it would be Dire Straits live in 1983, the Alchemy gig. And they put it on Sky Arts quite regular as well. It's brilliant concert, and they kind of did pretty much went from 83 through to probably 1986. I think it was in Australia. They finished the tour off, but it was that era of Dire Straits for me was just probably one of the best eras for not just that band, but musically for me. I'm a big fan of that stuff. You know, they did obviously Sultans was we talked about Sultans, didn't we, in the 70s?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he I don't know. I think he just he saved the 80s for me. Like I say, with all the you had all your rock stuff and what have you, but I've never been a metal heavy rock type player anyway. And with all the, like I say, nonsense of synthesizers, Dire Straits saved the 80s for me. And also guitar sound as well. He had one of my favourite guitar sounds ever. I always think it's one of the most stratty sounds that he never played on a Strat with. You know, he played the Schecters, didn't he? When you mentioned Schecters early on, but he had the Schecter Dream Machines, like the Super Strats. And that when I think of a Strat sound, I think of Knopfler, in the mid-80s. And obviously, you know, Money for Nothing was one of the biggest songs from the 80s, wasn't it? And Walk of Life. I mean, love it or hate it, you know, Walk of Life. That was another one that was a big
they
music
got the synthesizer in there.
Yeah, I beg to differ. It's a Hammond.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, so I'm thinking, yeah. So yeah, my big nomination's Dire Straits. I'm a Dire Straits fan anyway, but the 80s era of Dire Straits is kind of where it's at for me. I mean, Mark Knopfler went on to do, it was early 90s. They were called Dire Straits, but I think he had like a keyboard player. He had John Ilsley, the bass player, and there was Mark Knopfler. And then he incorporated pedal steel and percussion, and it kind of, obviously, I'm a big Dire Straits fan, so I won't hear anything bad about it. But that wasn't my era. I much preferred the 80s era, and really, really quite regular listening to Dire Straits, especially when I'm walking the pooch. I always put that album on. I mean, I'm not one for my routines, as you know, Lee. You know,
no,
but
of course not.
Usually, I usually put that album on, and and Tunnel of Love.
I think it's
great.
For some artists going into the 80s, I think a lot of players came into their own. I think, like for me, I love Eric Clapton in the 80s. I think he's.
Oh yeah.
There's like that songs like I don't even know how to play it, but. Like Forever Man, songs like that.
Yeah.
You know, man, they're just so good. But like, you know,
and of course he duetted with Tina Turner,
like
didn't he, on Tearing Us Apart? You remember that one?
I don't know. I don't know that actually. No, I haven't. I don't think I've heard that.
Your love is tearing us apart. Yeah.
Well, you got the whole the Journeyman record. That was 80s, wasn't it?
It was.
80s. And that like Pretending and Bad Love. Like I think a bit like Knopfler. They are guitar gods, but they did different things in different eras. But you're right, like Knopfler had a great thing going. He managed to use the 80s to his advantage, and I think Clapton's sound. He had so many sounds. He had like the Cream stuff, and the Blues Breaker era, and he had his Derek and the Dominoes in the 70s. But then that solo era, 80s Clapton, and just into that. I know we're all fans of the Royal Albert Hall. Is it 1991?
The 21 night was something nights it was called, wasn't it?
Yeah, and he's still really just rocking the 80s era Clapton sounds, Clapton 80s rig, and it's just a great. To
be honest, in the guitar show, I actually based my Clapton sound on 80s Clapton because that's what I preferred. Yeah, I loved it. Like when we do Bad Love, he had quite a heavy chorus, you know, quite a saturated sound on it, and Layla. In fact, one of my favourite, was it? I think it's either 86 or 87, when he did a gig with Phil Collins. Phil Collins, Nathan East, Greg Fillinganes. Oh, one of my favourite concerts. That's great. It's just a 4-piece band and Clapton with like 4x12s behind him, and that guitar is rocking. It sounds fantastic. Really good. Yeah. Ooh.
Love it.
I'm going to go watch that now. See you later, guys.
Talking of videos on in YouTube, watching stuff, this morning I stumbled across, I think it's from 2014. It was like a Beatles sort of commemorative gig, sort of paying tribute to classic Beatles tunes. Ringo and Paul are there, and they get up at the end of the night and play a few numbers as well. But it looks like one of these fancy American award shows where, like the Grammys or something, where the audience is just filled with like there's Tom Hanks in the front row singing. You got movie stars, rock stars. Joe Walsh is giving it some in the front row. It's amazing, but you should check it out because the band is killer. The band is like Kenny Aronoff on drums. You've got the guitar players for the whole night, other than a few tunes, is Luke and Peter Frampton.
Right.
They're like backing up, so you get different artists coming out and maybe doing vocals, but those guys are backing it up. Dave Grohl gets up at one point and plays drums. You got Gary Clark Jr. coming out. You've got Jeff Lynne from ELO. It is amazing, and every now and again, like Ringo will just get up and play drums for a number, and at the end of the night, it's just Paul and Ringo. It's awesome. I forgot to send it to you guys today, but I should mention it now on the podcast for listeners who maybe haven't seen it. It's a killer show.
Oh yeah. Send the link, definitely.
But not in any way related to the 80s. So, Phil, any more to say on that?
Well, I don't think there is anything else to say. We should just wrap the podcast up. That's it. Done.
Yeah. Yeah. How very dare you? How very dare you? Okay, so I was torn which way to go. There's so much 80s guitar stuff. Honourable mentions for me would be ZZ Top with Eliminator, and have to say AC/DC Back in Black 1980. For me, growing up, like Angus was probably like one of the biggest influences. He was the first like rock guitar player. Once I got past the kind of punk rock stage, Angus was like the first lead guitar player that I really got into. And so that Back in Black album is amazing. I think it's still, is it like one of the best-selling albums of all time? I think Back in Black. It's up there with Eagles' Greatest Hits and Thriller, I think. And obviously the first album with Brian Johnson on, just incredible guitar tones all over it. And I couldn't not mention, and this is what I thought you were going to say, Chris, 1987, Appetite for Destruction.
I was going to learn Night Train.
Night Train.
It is my favourite Guns N' Roses song. And Phil, you were playing me a version that you did with Jay years ago.
Yeah.
That sounded absolutely brilliant.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. No, that was actually one of my favourite songs in the set, Night Train. Yeah, I used to love playing that.
It's such a good song. And like the solo in that is just, Slash knows what he's doing in a solo like that. He's like tone, he's all over it.
Even if he doesn't know what he's doing, he's one of those players that's just so intuitive, isn't he?
It's good. Yeah, he's got such a cool appearance that he can't be like, oh yeah, I know all my theories. Like, nah, I just go with the flow, man.
Well, the thing with that band and that album, I mean, firstly, what a debut album. I mean, it's almost like a greatest hits when you look at it now.
Yeah.
Paradise City, Sweet Child of Mine, Welcome to the Jungle, Night Train.
It's incredible.
It's amazing.
So
but they were a band. They managed to bring that essence of the 70s. I think they're an 80s band in that sense. Their first album, 1987, but they're not 80s in the sense that it was overproduced. It's not Def Leppard. It's not something that's like super. They had a rawness to them and a groove to them that I think is more characteristic of those 70s bands that we've discussed before.
Yeah.
That kind of rough and ready. I mean, I think there's some sort of rumor that I've seen online that didn't Slash bring the Sweet Child of Mine riff to a rehearsal, and it was like a warm-up exercise that he was just joking around with, and they just started grooving it, and pretty soon, 10, 15 minutes later, they basically had Sweet Child of Mine done.
Oh, wow.
There's that kind of a band as opposed to the sit in the studio and that's multi-track, 115 tracks of, But anyway, my nomination couldn't be anything but this.
I love the Eurythmics. Awesome.
I've pulled my headphones out in disbelief.
That's such a great version of the Pet Shop Boys, mate. That's
It's a Telecaster.
Okay, I will keep this as brief as I can because I could do an entire series about Stevie and my love for Stevie and everything that's come since. But the reason I've nominated him today is
anyone listening, Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Stevie Ray Vaughan, of course.
There might be some people
the great
who don't know who he is.
SRV. Because he's an 80s guitar player. And I think people forget that. Because he's a blues guy, his character and his charisma and his records, his music doesn't shout 80s to me. But Texas Flood, the album from which Pride and Joy, which I just played, was from, was their first album. So I'm talking about the great Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble, which is the three-piece of Stevie, Chris Layton, and Tommy Shannon. Pride and Joy and Texas Flood was their first release, 1983. And Stevie tragically died in 1990. So his mainstream career and everything that we pick apart now and has influenced decades of copycats and everybody just, going over it with a fine-tooth comb happened really in a 7-year period within the 80s. But despite his status as a guitar hero and a guitar god, he doesn't scream 80s to me. When you say 80s, I think of some of the players that we've mentioned already. He's almost like he's from another time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's the case with a lot of blues players. I mean, blues players to me don't have an era. They're kind of just always there. B.B. King. When would you say B.B. King was? What's his era?
I suppose, but that's a bit different because BB's career literally did span decades. You've got 50s BB, you've got 70s BB, you've got 90s BB.
Well, obviously, coming from a different time, whereas Stevie Ray, obviously, releasing that in the 80s, he's surrounded by, and it could possibly be influenced by all these other bands around him. But obviously, he knows what he knows, and that's what he just goes out with. It keeps his integrity of what he likes to play and doesn't get influenced about what's around him. But in terms of the way music's moving or anything,
in terms of everything that happened in the 80s and all of the amazing guitar equipment and amazing guitar tones and everything like that, there's no one that seems to encapsulate that kind of that legend that Stevie has. And he was an 80s guy, but what he was pushing was so much more organic than everything else around him at the time. His guitar sounds were very simplistic, and the production of the records was very, very simplistic, virtually to the point where they were live albums essentially. But yet his legacy is still with us today in the deepest, darkest corners of all the tone hunting forums. You can't avoid Stevie's legacy and everybody chasing what he did.
When you talk about string gauges, like we were doing the other day,
he changed everything.
Always comes. Yeah, obviously it came from like people using a 9-gauge strings, and then Stevie comes out and is like, "Come on, guys." Yeah. Like, you call that a knife?
So he's playing.
He's like, he's
exactly. But he had the respect, and he had the industry looking at him as well. So in amongst all of these amazing shred-tastic virtuoso players, they were all kind of looking and going, "That guy from Texas, he's the real deal."
Yeah, and also tons of instrumental songs. Like I remember listening as a kid, listening to Riviera Paradise. It's quite a jazzy one for Mr. SRV. You know the song?
Yeah.
And also he did obviously a cover of Little Wing as well, and that was totally instrumental as well.
Talking of instrumental, I have to point this out. It made me laugh. So when I was just doing a bit of research earlier, there was an article online, and I won't mention the website because they don't deserve the advertising, even if it's to our 10 listeners. They quoted, among the many admirable tracks on Stevie's first release was his instrumental track, Lemmy. Lemmy. There we go. So I got a bit of information about Pride and Joy and about Texas Flood. which I think just enhances what I'm trying to say, that he was an artist stuck in the 80s, but really from a different time. The album was recorded in total in 3 days. One of which was a setup and kind of a get sounds day. So really, the tracks were laid down in 2 days. It was recorded in 1982, and at that point, they were unsigned. The reason they were recording the album was because they had previously played at the Montreux Jazz Festival. They were the first unsigned band to ever play at that festival, and they caught the attention of Jackson Browne, who really liked what they were doing and said, I've got a personal studio in LA. I'd love for you guys to just come down and make use of it. Have you got some time? And I think it was Thanksgiving weekend of 1982 that they went down and used the studio for free. And basically there's quotes of them saying it was just a big empty warehouse type place. And they set up in the corner, the three of them, just looking at each other, and recorded all of the tracks live. It was really, they were there to do scratch tracks and demos. They were so unprepared that Stevie was borrowing gear from the studio. The Dumbleland special amp that he used on that record was borrowed from Jackson Browne. And they used old tape. They didn't even bother using fresh tape. They just used what was lying around in the studio and recorded over some stuff that Jackson had been doing. And it wasn't until after that their career continued to go upwards, and they eventually got a record deal, something like, I think it was only 4 or 5 months later. The record label went back to that album and kind of remastered it, and I think they just redid one vocal and put it out, and that was the release. And obviously the rest is history. But the gear used on it for the gearheads, Stevie was using his Strat. He borrowed the Dumbleland Special from Jackson, and at the time, Dumbles were really unknown, nothing like the price they are today, and so he used that because it was lying around in the studio with a 4x12, and he used Fender Vibraverb. I think he used 2 with 15-inch speakers and just 2 mics. They just mic'd 2 cones, one on the Dumble, one on the Fender SM57. And like I say, tracked all together. If you listen to the isolated, the isolated drums or isolated guitar, you can hear loads of bleed on it because Stevie's amp was like so loud just in the room. And that was it. It was no overdubbing, just exactly as they've been doing in the Texan clubs for years. And obviously it went on to become what it's become. I think the only thing, as well as one overdub they did in post-production, this is when the record label got on board, was they added a Roland Dimension D for the gearheads. Stevie was using just his tube screamer as the only effect during tracking, but in production they added this Dimension D really to just add a little bit of width to the sound, but it does add a slight bit of kind of chorusy phasing on there. And that was it. So like as un-80s as it gets, but incredibly influential.
Yeah, definitely. And there's actually a program. I think it's on Amazon Prime, and it's the story of Stevie Ray Vaughan. That's a really good watch. Is that I watched it about a year ago. Hopefully, it's still on there. But I think it was another one of those. His death was one of those fluke things that he wasn't supposed to be on that helicopter, but a space came available, and he went and he got on it. And
I've actually heard that he took Clapton's seat.
Yes, he did.
I think that's the case, which is crazily tragic and such a loss. But that 80s period, just everything that we know about Stevie happened in such a small amount of time. They went from just a club band that had been playing the Texan circuit for years, and then eventually worked up to Montreux, which led them to this recording session, and then the signing, and that was it. They did the Austin City Limits not long after. Stevie got the call from David Bowie literally before they'd put this album out. He got the call from Bowie, who was interested in him coming to play on Let's Dance.
Let's Dance, yeah.
And he went and did the sessions, and there's interviews with Nile Rodgers and like Carmine Rojas and the guys that played on that, and they were like, yeah, this kid from Austin came in and blew our eardrums out in the studio, and we were like, this is the second coming of Hendrix. This is the real deal. And obviously things fell apart. He never quite made the tour. And I don't think it's really common knowledge why, whether Stevie just quit. He didn't like the pressure of the big tour, and he preferred to do his. I mean, he didn't use set lists in his own band, so going on a Bowie tour was like a different world. But I think there was some finance involved, or he didn't want to be Bowie's guitarist. He wanted to be, do his own thing, and actually that act of him stepping away from the tour right before they were about to embark on it actually got the media's attention and got the industry's attention even more so. They were like, we need to know who this guy is. Who's just turned down Bowie?
Yeah, but
So
I suppose he was. I suppose he was kind of in his bubble, wasn't he? I mean, he was. I mean, from what I can gather from Stevie Ray Vaughan, from a lot of those type of players, the fame, the money thing, it's not. It don't really. They don't care about all that. If anything, that gets in the way. They've just got a talent for what they do. They love what they do, and that is what they do. And like Mark Knopfler as well. He reason he packed in Dire Straits was because it just got too big. He didn't like it. He was saying there's people. He said, I'd walk into catering and I didn't recognise anybody. And, and I'm like, and I didn't like that. I didn't, really didn't like that. And that's why he sort of called it a day and just did his own solo project.
I heard that Hendrix didn't ever actually have any money. He had money and he was worth money, but he didn't like to have money. So he left it all in the hands of his management, his record companies, and would just ask them whenever he needed something. Anything paying for, they would just pick up the tab. And he didn't like to be associated with the money or see it or have it, do anything.
I've got a similar
maybe
situation.
For the same reason.
I've got a similar situation, but nobody picks the tab up after me. I think it's called being skint, innit?
Oh, well, it won't be long now, and we'll be back to work, which will be
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. I was listening
another rehearsal
to,
this week, which was nice, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, it was great.
On that point.
Yeah, and we went to the pub afterwards.
We may have ended up at the pub,
which was nice too. But I was listening to a podcast today, and Mark King was on there, and he was talking about the touring. Apparently, the tour every couple of years, and he was like, he was saying there's a lot of people that, because everybody's got a year old, everybody's going, they would take a year out. We'll just look at it as a year off type thing. But everybody gets that little bit older. And he said there's a lot of people that just won't be coming back. They've called it a day. And to be honest, I know people on our level that have called it a day that are not going to be coming back. And you think, I wonder, will the Stones never tour again? You don't, it's a really weird thing to see what's going to happen. Who will be back? Who's going to tour? Who isn't?
Well, beyond the financial reasons as to why that might happen, obviously some people would love to return, but maybe just can't. They've had to take up other things, at least for the time being. You've also got the fact that we've had a forced break that probably not many of us have had. Certainly those guys that have been doing. I mean, you mentioned the Stones, but when do those people get a forced break that sees them probably not do anything for the best part of a year or 18 months? There's going to be a lot of people in that camp that go, you know what, I actually quite like this. And maybe go, not that fussed about going back.
Trouble is, a lot of people have had too much time to think, haven't they? It's quite dangerous.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I know a few people that have kind of gone, you know what? I kind of like this life. And when I do,
they
when I
give
do
up,
go
they
back,
give up gigging.
You what, Chris?
Sorry, they give up gigging. Obviously, forced to give up gigging and get themselves a 9 to 5. They start getting paid more than they were from gigging, and then they're home at a reasonable time for dinner, and they're like, "Well, this is pretty nice. I'll just become a weekend warrior," as they say.
Yeah,
and,
I mean, not even people that that gig. People that have got a inverted commas normal job. Even a few people that I know, they've kind of gone, do you know what? It wasn't worth the stress. It just wasn't worth the stress of what I used to do. All the, 3-4 hour round trip commutes and things like that. And it's not worth it. So it's going to be a very different world. And I would like to think a more chilled out world when we go back. So hopefully a lot of people will be thinking more like that. Is the rat race that important?
Hope so. We've certainly all had a change of perspective, haven't we? I think everyone has.
Think so.
Whatever you've been through, we've had a change of perspective.
Indeed. God,
Well,
I'll
we
tell you
just
what,
got
there's
quite
a-
we got quite deep at the end of an 80s podcast.
Oh, we have.
Let's bring it
Wait,
back.
in the bring it back. I've got one nomination. Obviously, we could probably just start reeling off some names now. But one of my favourite guitar players of all time is Lindsey Buckingham from Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to play this riff. You could probably tell me what it is.
Big
Yeah,
love.
what that is. It is from Tango in the Night. From again, same year as my first nomination, 87. Same year, yeah.
Good year.
Oh, you watched the? I downloaded it off the Apple Tunes, whatever they call it these days, and it's Lindsey Buckingham solo. I think where did it? New York or somewhere. That's an amazing concert. That's one where I redeemed myself for acousticalness.
Go from someone who hates acoustic guitars, apparently.
Except when Lindsey Buckingham plays them.
Yeah. I was watching a rig rundown of his, the Premier Guitar
It's that tour.
channel on YouTube.
Yeah, it's from that tour.
Oh, is
Yeah.
it? Oh man, those guitars are amazing, aren't they? Like he's got like it's like it looks like an acoustic body electric guitar.
Turner.
And he's got like
Yeah.
and he's got like a humbucker which is kind of angled.
Yeah.
Like it works on like a rotation. And obviously, he just finds the sweet spot and then just leaves it there.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty cool innovation, actually, isn't it?
They're very expensive. I thought, oh, you know what I'm like. I like the look of that. How much?
He's got like 11 in a flight case, hasn't he?
I know. He's got like a nice detached house in a flight case. You know what I mean? That's probably what the word.
Well, that's maybe something that we haven't mentioned. I mean, the 80s was not only the era for sort of flamboyance in music, but also music equipment. I mean, just look what happened to guitar rigs.
Look at Steve Vai. He ended up with a heart-shaped guitar and like
it was like the era that the studio left the studio and went on the road with most people, didn't it?
I've got to be honest. I do love a nice rack.
Well, you've got a rack, haven't you?
Yeah. I had. I had guitar racks, not the 80s, probably the 90s. I had quite a big guitar rack then as well, with the power amps and all that kind of malarkey and separate cabs, and then it just got ridiculous. So I stopped all that stuff, and then just recently I've gone back to rack again, and it's like I don't know, it feels like going home. I love, although the gear's all more modern now, but it's something about a rack. I just love rack gear. It's it's good. That's a good note to end the podcast on. We all like a nice rack.
Feels nice rack.
Yeah.
I think my pizza's about to arrive.
Excellent. Oh dear. Well, hope you guys have all enjoyed that. I enjoyed it, and I'm certainly going to go watch a lot of 80s movies now.
Yeah. I need to go and watch Back to the Future #3. Look out for those big beards and.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's so good. Yeah, and check Instagram, because when we post this live, Phil, I understand you're going to be posing on Instagram in some 80s spandex for us.
I might just.
Or
go
was I
naked,
not supposed
be
to say
honest.
that?
No, it's a different account. Is that one? Oh, do the socials. Let's go.
Yeah, to see pictures and videos of some stuff, please head to Facebook and Instagram. On Facebook, you can find us. It's Phil Walker, guitarist, Lee Williams, guitarist, and Chris Anthony, guitar. On Instagram, it is Phil Walker, guitar, Chris Anthony, guitar, and Lee Troy, guitar. You can search for The Story of Guitar Heroes on Instagram and Facebook, or go to the website, www.storyofguitarheroes.com. And, of course, there's the YouTube Phil Walker, guitarist, where you can see lots of behind-the-scenes guitar demos and all sorts. There we go. Episode
Splendid.
24, I think.
Yeah, is it?
I'm losing track.
Yeah, episode 24. We could play you out if you like. A little bit of 80s rock guitar, shall we? Here we go.
What are we playing?
The Guitar Heroes podcast will return in 2 weeks' time, as this time next week, Lee will be enjoying a staycation in Wales.